can see myself really well in that reflection. But you couldn't before. Believe me, that's after quite a while of polishing it up. But stick around for the video to the end of the video for this one again, and you'll get to hear more about the siren itself. Alright, hopefully it works this time. In my brief little attempt to test it before I did the video, it didn't seem to want to get a good ground on the bottom, but we'll see if it does it now. Alright, here we go. See what I mean? Let's try it again. Not a very long wind down, but it is also a very small rotor. Yeah, it's difficult to get a ground on this thing. Wow. Yeah, that does hurt the ears, though. That's for certain. But the siren, believe it or not, is actually incomplete. This is just how I happened to get it. Now, if you had noticed on the tag, when I had done the quick little pan over, is that the siren is a 1-4H, which there is actually a documented picture of on a website called WorthPoint. Basically, it's just a website that a lot of eBay sellers typically like to use to kind of set a baseline for their prices of their products they're going to sell. Specifically, more catering towards antique sellers, so people can kind of figure out what things have sold for. But there is a 1-4H that had also sold on eBay. It looked exactly like this. However, that one was complete, and it was I think a later version of it, because this tag right here states motor pack with Bosch number 505 grease, and in that version of the tag it just says motor packed with high temperature grease. So I'm just assuming that this is just kind of just a different model. But looking at the siren, it has a nickel plated deflector cone, or cup, whatever you want to call it, much like a Model L, A, or D. And it has the distinct E.D.Bullard tapered rotor and stator. And I believe I do know the reason why they actually did that, not only because I've seen an old advertisement that Bullard had put out that kind of describes their sirens and why they'd done certain things the way they did, but one of the reasons why, at least what Bullard says, the reason why they have it with a tapered rotor is because they believe that having the ports somewhat more angled towards the axis of where the sound is going to be directed to, it makes the siren more efficient. I'm not entirely sure if that's really true or not. That sounds a lot like just marketing. I believe that the real reason why Bullard had done tapered rotors and tapered stators is because it makes getting the tolerances between the rotor and stator extremely tight. It makes getting those tolerances really, really easy, rather than something like a traditional drum style rotor, which is just one cylinder inside of a much larger cylinder with a very, very slight gap in between the two of them. If you were to try to get as tight of a tolerance as you could, there's only so tight you can get in the casting process, the machining process, before, if you had made any mistakes, it would be very, very difficult to just go back in and have to remachine the whole thing in order for it to fit properly. And that lead into a problem of itself. But the benefit of a tapered rotor is that if it is too tight of a tolerance, all you have to do is slide the rotor back a little bit, and the ports will still line up just fine. But the gap in between the rotor and stator will be adjusted thusly. I'm also tired today. It's been a long process, surprisingly, to try to get this thing to work properly. I actually had to go out and actually buy a 6-volt battery and a charger that's dedicated just for running that, because this is a 6-volt siren. But going back to what I had said about the other version of this siren that I've seen, the only other picture of a siren like this that I've seen, the reason why I said that this is incomplete is because that siren has an actual projector that comes off of this front, off the I guess you can consider the intake of the rotor. And it actually mounts with these 5 little screws that are right here. You can even see somewhat of a dirt line of where it used to sit at some point before it was removed. And I don't know where it ended up, but I have very quickly this 3D modeled a retrofit for it, so we made of plastic at least. But it will have a projector that will come off the front, because with the shape of the stator in the direction of where the air is flowing, it's actually throwing air out and recycling it back into the rotor, which leads to a lot of inefficiencies. That's why the older Model A's, for example, that Federal had made, they are not nearly as loud as the later versions, where that back of the projector, or the back dish, is more shaped like this rather than the older style where they're just basically like 2 cones stuck inside of each other. But that's just one of the things aside. But one of the things that I had to do to this to get it actually operating properly, I had noted in my other video when I was kind of talking about what was going to be coming up, was I did have to rewire it. So I just went in and I had to. You have no idea how unbelievably difficult that was to do, because none of this wants to come apart. None of it wants to come apart at all. So the way to get the whole motor apart is you have to take off those 3 screws that hold the back dish onto the stator and the motor. And then once you do that, the whole stator actually comes off. And then you have to take the rotor off, which is a pain in and of itself. And then there's 4 screws behind that actually hold this motor cover together. And that's actually the rear part of the motor. This whole thing is the motor itself. It is extremely difficult to get the actual stator, or I should say the field of the motor back into this metal case. It was quite a pain. But one of the things that I found interesting about these sirens is that Bullard really didn't specialize in sirens too much. It really wasn't their main. It wasn't really much of their bread and butter, the same way that B&M, or the same way it was for B&M and Federal. Whereas sirens were kind of just like an aside. They were one of the things that they happened to manufacture. I mean, if anyone knows any more details about Bullard, it's basically just a safety company. So hard hats being one of their most popular inventions, actually, was just the traditional hard hats like we see all over the worksite now. And they make backup alarms for trucks. There's a system that they used to call the decibel, I think is what it used to be called, which would go on the hub, the rear hub of a truck tire, and whenever a truck was rolling forward, it wouldn't make any noise, but as soon as you backed up, the hammers would engage, and it would actually chime a bell every quarter rotation of a truck tire, which is kind of interesting, like an old way around having a backup alarm for trucks. But as I had said, they really weren't known too much for sirens. They only made only a few models. I think only about 5 models I can really think of in their history, this being one of them, as well as the one that's in Sacramento on the Fruit Building, and then the gas-driven models, and then a couple of their larger horsepower air raid sirens. But they weren't this was not really their mainstay, and I can kind of understand why, because this was not... There was plenty of companies at the time that already had that taken care of, such as Federal and B&M, so they really didn't have a means of competing with sirens because those were pretty much already cleared. But regardless, it is an interesting piece. It is a very, very interesting piece. I do hope to have this horn printed soon, and I could probably take some more pictures and have that posted so you can see what it's supposed to look like. But if you go and look through my channel, you can probably find the post I had made that has a picture of this when I had initially got it. And then it also has a picture of the siren that it was on, Worth Point, to kind of illustrate what this siren should look like. But here's again the tag, as you've seen before. But I have talked at length enough about the siren, so let's go ahead and give it another blast, this time a little bit further away. This spot seems as appropriate as any. Now I have to excuse me because I will have to run to the siren. And run back. Alright, here we go. Yeah. So there we go. I hope to have another video up of it soon, once it actually has the horn placed on it. But until then, thanks for watching, guys, and sticking with the video.